So I want you to picture this for a second. You're sitting in a car, and your foot is just absolutely slammed down on the gas pedal.
Oh boy, just redlining it.
Exactly. The engine is roaring, the RPMs are maxed out, the hood is getting like dangerously hot, and there is all this incredible noise and friction. But you look out the window and you haven't moved an inch.
Because the car is in neutral.
Right, because it's in neutral. So all that heat, all that noise, all that burnt fuel, and you are literally getting nowhere.
It is, it's incredibly exhausting just thinking about it.
Yeah.
Because eventually, an engine running that hot is going to start damaging its own parts.
Yeah, it breaks down. And that is exactly the physical and emotional reality of overthinking and rumination. It is your brain revving in neutral. So whether you are prepping for a high-stress meeting right now, or you're just sitting on your couch feeling completely bogged down by an endless loop of mental chatter, this deep dive is for you. We have a huge stack of notes today focused on conquering anxiety, drawing from some really fascinating source material on stopping overthinking. And the mission today is to get that car into drive.
Which is, it's vital to understand from a biological perspective before you even get into the psychology of it all.
Yeah, the biology is wild.
Right. Because our brains are essentially these ancient, highly evolved, problem-solving machines. Like for our ancestors, constant thinking and projecting and worrying, that kept them alive.
If there was a tiger, you better be obsessing over the tiger.
Exactly. The brain obsessed over the tiger problem until it was solved or, you got eaten. But today, when there's no immediate physical life or death problem to solve, that powerful machine doesn't just switch off.
It just keeps running.
Right. It turns inward. It starts manufacturing problems just to give its gears something to grind on.
It's a machine that demands a job. And the source material we're looking at today provides a phenomenal framework for giving it the right job, moving us from a state of reactive anxiety to a state of proactive, mindful acceptance.
Yeah, and to stop that engine from revving, the first thing the framework asks us to do is look at who is actually sitting in the driver's seat.
Right.
It comes down to mindset. There is a very sharp line drawn here between two ways of moving through the world. You've got the reactive mindset and you have the proactive mindset.
Let's break those down.
Sure. So a reactive mindset is this fundamental belief that life happens to you. It's a state of deep dependency. When you're reactive, you're constantly pointing fingers at the environment.
You rely on blame.
Exactly. Blame, victimhood, and you spend a massive amount of cognitive energy in these if-only daydreams. If only I had more money, or if only my boss wasn't such a jerk.
So you are essentially waiting for the external world to change so your internal world can feel better.
Precisely. It's a total surrender of power.
Which leads right into a massive trap the source highlights, which is complaining. And look, we all do it.
Oh, of course we do.
It feels so cathartic in the moment, but neurologically it's cementing that powerlessness.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because complaining literally forces your brain to rehearse a reactive mode. When you complain, you are verbally stripping yourself of your own agency.
Wow.
Yeah, you're cementing a neural pathway that says, I am helpless here. So the immediate circuit breaker for complaining is to just stop mid-sentence and ask yourself one question. What action can I take here?
Just immediately pivoting.
Right. Because a proactive mindset means having an internal locus of control. You focus purely on the actions you can take, regardless of how unfair the environment might be.
Okay, I really want to unpack this for a second because I can hear the pushback from the audience already.
Sure, yeah.
Because we can't actually control everything. If I unexpectedly lose my job tomorrow, or God forbid someone gets a terrible medical diagnosis, it doesn't really make sense to pretend I'm the CEO of the universe, right?
Yeah.
Some things just happen to us, completely outside of our control.
And that is a crucial distinction.
Yeah.
Really glad you brought that up. Because being proactive is not about controlling the outcome.
Okay.
We obviously can't control the macro economy or, our cellular genetics. Being proactive is entirely about controlling your response to the outcome.
Right.
And the key to unlocking that response, the way you find the space to actually choose an action, is by creating something called mental distance.
Mental distance.
Yeah. When you are right up against a problem, when you're completely fused with the sheer panic of, say, losing a job, your amygdala is firing so hard that you literally have no perspective. You need distance to see your options.
So it's kind of like looking at a digital map on your phone.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, like when you are totally zoomed in, a traffic jam on your street looks like the entire world is gridlocked. It just fills the whole screen, and you panic. But when you pinch the screen and zoom out, creating that mental distance, you suddenly see there are like 3 alternate routes just a mile away.
Exactly. The traffic jam is still there, the problem hasn't been deleted, but your relationship to it has completely changed.
Right. So how do we actually zoom out?
Well, the source outlines 3 specific ways to pinch that screen. First, there's spatial distance,
Which means,
literally leaving the room,
yeah,
getting up and walking outside. Changing your physical proximity to the stressor signals to your nervous system that you are not physically trapped.
that makes total sense. Just move your body.
Right. Second is temporal distance, which is distance in time. This is the act of forcing your brain to fast forward. You ask, okay, this specific moment is agonizing, but how will I view this a year from now, 5 years from now?
That instantly shrinks the problem.
It really does. And then the third is hypothetical distance. This is recognizing that the situation could be different, that alternative choices exist, even if you haven't made them yet.
Actually, there's a great journaling technique in our notes to force this hypothetical distance.
Oh yeah, the advising a friend technique.
Yes. If you're listening right now and you're super stressed about an email or a confrontation, try advising a friend. You write down your exact problem, but pretend a good friend has come to you asking for advice on it.
It's wild how instantly this removes your ego.
It totally removes all those personal blind spots. I mean, we are so much wiser about other people's lives because we aren't tangled up in their emotional traffic jam.
Exactly. It strips away the panic and leaves only the logistics.
But okay, distance is great in theory. What happens when the thoughts are screaming too loud? Like when my brain is at a level 10, I can't just journal it away. How do we practically pull ourselves out of that spin?
Yeah. That brings us to a really specific clinical framework highlighted in the notes called ACT. ACT, which stands for Action Commitment Therapy. So it's an acronym. Accept your internal experience, choose a valued direction, and take action. And that very first word, accept, is usually where the entire machine breaks down for people.
Why is that?
Because the source explains that anxiety doesn't always come from the negative event itself. It actually comes from experiential avoidance.
Wait, experiential avoidance. But isn't avoiding bad experiences just a biological survival mechanism? Like, if I touch a hot stove, I avoid it so I don't burn to death. Why is avoiding negative thoughts suddenly the root of the problem?
That's a great point. But avoiding physical danger keeps you alive, whereas avoiding internal discomfort creates this awful feedback loop of panic. We spend massive amounts of energy trying to block out unwanted thoughts and feelings. We drink, we scroll endlessly on our phones, we distract ourselves.
Right, we just want to numb it out.
Exactly. But the brain logs that avoidance as proof that the thought itself is a deadly threat. Like, oh, we're running away from this thought. It must be as dangerous as a tiger. Mm-hmm. So to get mental distance, we have to stop running from the thought and instead anchor ourselves in the present moment.
Which brings up the 5-4-3-2-1 sensory grounding technique.
Yes, highly effective.
But it's not just a distraction trick, right? There's an actual mechanical reason it works. Like when your brain is spiraling, you stop and name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 you can touch, 2 you can smell, and 1 you can taste.
Right.
And by doing that, you are literally forcing your brain's working memory to process real-time sensory data, which crowds out the rumination because your brain only has so much bandwidth, and you are forcibly reallocating it away from the hypothetical future and dropping it right into the physical present.
That's exactly it. You are changing the channel, and that sets the stage for the core mechanism of ACT, which is cognitive diffusion.
Diffusion, not diffusion, right.
Right, with an E. We have to separate the symbol of the thing from the thing itself. So the word apple is not an actual apple. You can't bite into the word. In the exact same way, a thought about a disaster is not an actual disaster. It is literally just a firing of neurons.
That is so true.
Yeah, but when we fuse our thoughts with reality, we suffer. Diffusion is stepping back into what the framework calls the observing self.
So it's like splitting your consciousness into 2 parts, the part that is experiencing and the part that is just watching.
Exactly. The source uses a very heavy example to illustrate the difference.
Yeah.
Imagine receiving a stage 3 cancer diagnosis.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's intense. The experiencing self feels like it just got hit by a freight train. It is terrified, confused, devastated, and that is completely valid. But the observing self is the part of you that can take a breath, step back and say, I am noticing that I am feeling a massive amount of terror right now. It doesn't deny the fear, but it observes it as a passing state rather than an absolute identity. And because it observes the terror without being destroyed by it, that observing self can then actually choose the next right action.
Okay, but this flies in the face of a massive self-help trope.
Oh, totally.
Because for years we've been told to challenge our negative thoughts. If my brain says you're going to fail this presentation, I'm supposed to fight that thought with logic and shout back, "No, I'm incredibly prepared and I will succeed." Are we saying that doesn't work?
It's a very common approach, but the notes point out a massive counterintuitive insight here. Challenging your thoughts often backfires.
Wait, really? Why?
Because arguing with your thoughts is really just another form of experiential avoidance. You are going to war with your current reality. You are standing there saying, "I shouldn't be feeling anxious," but you are feeling anxious. Fighting it validates the thought as an opponent worthy of a fight, which just gives it way more energy.
Oh, that makes so much sense. So instead of trying to play lawyer and prove the thought wrong, the framework suggests we ask a totally different question. Is this thought helpful?
Yes.
Because that bypasses the ego's need to be right completely.
It shifts the entire paradigm. Take the thought, my relationship is making me unhappy. If you try to challenge the truth of that, you might get stuck in an endless debate. I mean, it might actually be true, but is it helpful?
Right.
If focusing on "I'm unhappy" just makes you sit passively on the couch feeling paralyzed, then the thought is functionally useless.
Yeah.
It doesn't lead to a change in behavior.
But if you shift into that observing self you mentioned, you might reframe it as, "I seem to be afraid to make a decision about this relationship." That thought is incredibly helpful because it points directly to an action. It identifies the fear and gives you a tangible direction to move.
Exactly. And if you find yourself totally gridlocked in one of these unhelpful loops, you can't just think your way out of it. You have to physically break the circuit.
Yeah, the notes suggest the 3M strategy for this. Move, make, meet. You move your body, you make something, or you meet someone.
The make part of that is so fascinating neurologically.
Right. Whether you are baking a loaf of bread, painting a picture, or building a birdhouse, creating something that yields a physical result requires your brain to engage motor skills, sequencing, spatial awareness. It forces blood flow into different regions of the brain, effectively starving the default mode network where all that passive rumination happens.
You are shifting the machinery from passive worry to active mechanical engagement. It's brilliant.
Okay, so we know how to break a loop once it starts. But how do we stop the loop from firing in the first place? I know a lot of people listening are already familiar with the baseline concept of cognitive restructuring, trying to fix the foundation so these thoughts don't ruin our day.
Right. Yes, dealing with ANTs. Automatic negative thoughts. These are the deeply ingrained unconscious biases that filter our reality. And we all have them. The text highlights the classic cognitive distortions that act as the fuel for these ANTs. There's magnification.
Right, where you blow one tiny typo in an email out of proportion until it means you're terrible at your job.
Exactly. Then there's overgeneralization, which is taking one negative instance and applying it to everything forever. There's black and white thinking, where there is no middle ground. You either crush the workout or you're a lazy failure.
And catastrophizing, immediately jumping to the absolute worst possible outcome.
Exactly. And the source material has a great example of how absurd overgeneralization can get if we don't check it. There's this guy who deeply believes all women are gold diggers.
Oh boy.
Yeah. And when you trace the root of that belief, you find out it's because a girl named Angela dumped him for someone with more money back in 1992.
That is wild.
Right. He took one painful, isolated experience and slapped it over half the human population for 3 decades. So to dismantle this, the framework uses Socratic questioning. You don't yell at yourself. You just start asking, what is the actual empirical evidence for this belief? And very quickly, that lazy automatic thinking just crumbles.
Notice the posture there, too. You aren't attacking yourself for having the thought.
No, not at all.
It's basically shifting from a courtroom to a laboratory. You aren't a harsh judge banging a gavel screaming, "Guilty of bad thoughts." You're just a curious scientist looking through a microscope going, look at that bizarre little thought. Where did that come from? What's its structure? Let's document it.
I love that. That objective curiosity is vital. Because once you have that distance, you can use the 2-column technique. On one side of a piece of paper, you write down the automatic negative thought. And on the other side, you don't write down some forced toxic positivity affirmation.
Thank goodness.
Right. You write down a useful alternative. So if your thought is, "I'm a total failure," you don't write, "I am a golden god of infinite success." You write, "I failed at this specific task, but I can learn from the errors and try a new approach."
And when it comes to catastrophizing, the notes suggest playing the what-if game, but forcing yourself to play it all the way to the end.
Oh, this is a powerful one.
It really is. The example used is a doctor facing a malpractice suit. The catastrophic spiral goes, I get sued, which leads to, I lose my medical license, which leads to, I'm totally ruined.
Right, full panic.
But if you ask, what is the actual real-world worst-case scenario? If you lost your license, what then? Well, you'd still be alive. You would still have a deep knowledge of biology. You would eventually find consulting work or pivot to a new career. When you force the brain to follow the nightmare all the way to its logical conclusion, it totally strips the terror away. You realize a monster in the closet is just like a pile of laundry. It's annoying, but it's not going to eat you.
It restores your sense of capability. But, what about when the threat isn't just a mental distortion? What if the malpractice suit is real? Because for real-world external stressors, the framework offers the 4 A's of stress management. Avoid, alter, accept, adapt.
This is such a practical toolkit. So first, avoid. Sometimes the most proactive thing you can do is just walk away. If you know that checking the news right before bed ruins your sleep, avoid it. Just put the phone in another room. Second, alter. Can you change the environment? If your neighbor's dog is barking while you're trying to work, go over and politely ask them to bring the dog inside. You take action to alter the stressor.
Right. But if you can't avoid it and you can't alter it, you move to accept. And this is deeply misunderstood. Acceptance doesn't mean you have to like the situation. It just means you drop the resistance to it.
Right. Fighting reality.
Yeah. Like if a family member deeply wrongs you and refuses to apologize, you forgive them, not to let them off the hook, but to release your own nervous system from the chronic stress of holding the grudge. And finally, adapt. This is about managing your own internal expectations. If you are a perfectionist who is constantly burning out, you adapt by actively lowering your standards for certain tasks to a good enough level.
Okay, so avoid, alter, accept, adapt. But this brings us to a really interesting wall. Altering your environment only works if you have power over it. Avoiding only works if you can leave. What happens when life throws something at us that we absolutely cannot avoid, cannot alter, and cannot adapt to?
The big stuff.
Yeah. What about chronic illness or deep grief? Here we reach the ultimate paradigm shift in the notes, the move into pure acceptance and non-duality.
Yes. To understand this, the source introduces the concept of 2 fundamental places we can inhabit. One is called elsewhere. Elsewhere is the past and the future. It is entirely constructed of memories, regrets, and hypotheticals. It literally does not exist in reality. And elsewhere is exactly where anxiety and depression live.
And the second place?
The second place is the here and now. And the only way to access the here and now is through your physical body.
Because your body is incapable of being in the past or the future. It is only ever processing this exact second.
Exactly. And when we anchor into the here and now, we encounter a vital formula: pain versus suffering. Pain is inevitable. It's a biological or emotional reality in the present moment. Having the flu is painful, your joints ache, you have a fever.
Right.
But suffering is the narrative we construct about the pain. Suffering is lying in bed with the flu, furiously angry at yourself because you think you caught it by forgetting your umbrella and worrying you'll fall behind at work. Pain is mandatory. Suffering is entirely optional.
Okay, I have to ask the hard question here because it sounds almost entirely passive. If someone is treating me terribly at work, am I just supposed to sit there, smile, say namaste, and let them walk all over me because I'm dropping my narrative?
Not at all. That's a huge misconception. Acceptance does not equal submission. It means dealing with reality exactly as it is, without adding a heavy layer of judgment and suffering on top of it. The source gives a brilliant, simple example. Imagine seeing someone drop a chocolate wrapper on the sidewalk.
Okay.
The pure fact, the unvarnished reality of the situation, is simply that a piece of paper is on the ground.
Right, just the physics of it.
Exactly. The suffering is the massive internal monologue you instantly generate about how people are selfish garbage, society is decaying, nobody respects their community anymore, and the world is doomed.
Yeah, we've all done that.
You've taken a tiny physical event and spun it into a global existential crisis. Accepting the reality of the wrapper means you see it, and maybe you choose to proactively pick it up, or maybe you keep walking. But you don't go to war with humanity in your head. You stick to the facts, and you drop the judgment.
You separate the raw data from the dramatic story. And this ties directly into the concept of non-duality. The notes point heavily to the Buddhist concept of yin and yang. Our minds are absolutely obsessed with slicing the world into opposing pairs. Good and bad. Right and wrong. Success and failure.
Yeah. constantly categorizing.
But that constant division, that need to categorize every moment, generates massive anxiety.
There's a classic philosophical story used to illustrate this. A farmer's horse runs away. The neighbors come over and say, "What terrible luck." The farmer simply says, "Maybe, maybe not."
I love this story.
The next day, the horse returns, bringing a wild stallion with it. The neighbors celebrate, "What fantastic luck." The farmer says, "Maybe, maybe not." The farmer's son tries to ride the wild stallion, gets thrown, and shatters his leg. "What a tragedy," the neighbors say. "Maybe, maybe not," says the farmer. The following week, the army comes through, drafting all able-bodied young men for a brutal war, but they leave the son behind because of his broken leg.
Wow. Maybe, maybe not. We're so quick to judge a single frame of a movie as definitively good or bad without knowing how the entire film plays out.
Exactly. Non-duality is recognizing that these opposites fundamentally rely on each other. You cannot have the rise without the fall. When you stop fighting to separate your life into neat little piles of good and bad, you stop the engine from revving. You find a profound sense of peace.
And to practice this in daily life, there's a great exercise called There I Go. You basically sit on a park bench and you just watch people. When you see someone and feel a judgment forming, you intentionally attribute their trait to yourself. Like you see a grumpy person scowling at the barista, and instead of judging them as a jerk, you say to yourself, "There I go. My back probably hurts today. I'm feeling overwhelmed and crabby. I'm just trying to get my coffee."
It forces your brain out of isolation and builds instant empathy.
Yeah, it completely short-circuits the judgmental ego.
It really connects you to them instead of elevating you above them.
Yeah.
Another highly practical tool for this is simply replacing the word "but" with the word "and" in your daily vocabulary.
It's amazing how much friction one little conjunction causes, but it inherently creates conflict. It implies that the second half of the sentence invalidates the first half.
Yes. And creates wholeness. Instead of saying, "I love cooking, but I'm terrible at baking," you say, "I love cooking and I'm terrible at baking."
Yeah.
It removes the internal war. The source uses the example of a friend who is financially struggling but just had her 5th child. Your judgmental brain wants to say, "I love her, but she makes terrible choices." If you replace it with "and," you say, "I love her, and she's in a very difficult financial situation."
That feels totally different.
Right. You acknowledge the complex reality of her life without reducing her entire identity to a bad mom. You allow yourself to hold 2 truths simultaneously.
It takes so much pressure off. So as we pull all of these threads together, the path forward becomes incredibly clear. If you find yourself overthinking, the first step is to shift from a reactive mindset of blame to a proactive mindset of action. Look for the small things you can control.
Use the ACT framework to create distance. Accept the discomfort rather than avoiding it. Step back into your observing self and look at your thoughts like a curious scientist. Ask yourself if a thought is helpful, rather than endlessly debating if it's true.
Break the physical loop of rumination by moving your body or making something tangible. Gently restructure those automatic cognitive distortions and play the what-if game all the way to the end to rob your fears of their power.
And ultimately, anchor yourself in the raw data of the here and now. Drop the exhausting need to judge every single event as definitively good or bad. Because remember, none of this is about becoming some perfect, emotionless Zen robot.
That is an impossible standard.
Exactly. It's simply about giving yourself the grace to be a messy, complicated human being who chooses not to compound their pain with an imaginary layer of suffering.
You don't have to be the CEO of the universe. Which leaves us with one final, lingering question to ponder as we wrap up this deep dive. We've explored how our ego desperately wants to sit in the judgment seat labeling things, endlessly dwelling in the regrets of the past, or obsessing over the fears of the future. But if anxiety truly only lives in the future and depression truly only lives in the past, who are you when you strip away the past and the future? If you existed only in the raw, unfiltered present moment, in the absolute here and now, would your ego even exist at all, or would you finally truly just be free?
Wow, that is the ultimate question we all have to answer for ourselves.
So next time you feel the heat rising and the mental noise getting deafening, remember, take your foot off the gas. You don't have to sit there revving in neutral, put it in drive, and just be here.